Okay, First Lady, you're live.
Excellent. Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome. This month, we are celebrating the first anniversary of climate change education being incorporated across all K-12 learning standards in the great state of New Jersey. As the first and so far only state in the nation to achieve this important benchmark, we are bringing some of our state's greatest resources together in the fight against climate change. Our incredibly talented, creative, and motivated student body, and our best in the nation education system. We recognize that the climate crisis is an imminent threat to our way of life, our health, and quite frankly, our survival. Climate change will affect every aspect of our lives, from the way we travel, eat, and dress, to the way we design our cities, insure properties, and care for our own health. Despite the dangers, I am incredibly optimistic for New Jersey's future, and that's in large part because of the passion, dedication, and focus that this generation of young people has shown for resolving the climate crisis. Our goal is to equip them with the knowledge, skills, and experience they need to launch full-scale attack on climate change, no matter what career they choose to pursue in the future. Today's panel discussion, Listening to Student Voices, Developing New Jersey's K-12 Climate Change Education Strategy, is an opportunity for us to hear from some of these bright minds and passionate voices themselves. With us today is Venetia Patel, a Monroe High School graduate and incoming freshman at the College of New Jersey, Ishan Bharadwaj, a seventh grader at Millbourne Middle School, just graduated today, Maya Burns, a junior at Marine Academy of Science and Technology, Miriam Tallfiles, a senior at Infinity High School and student representative on Jersey City's Board of Ed, Olivani Bieto, a seventh grader at Patterson PS number 21, and Sinai Clayton, an eighth grader at Winslow Schools. Welcome, everyone, and thank you so much for being here. I think it's about the first week of summer vacation for all of you, so we really appreciate your taking your time to join us. Okay, so let's get started. Our first question is for Venetia, Miriam, and Ishan. I wonder if you three would tell us about your work on climate change and how did your school nurture your own personal interest in climate change activism? Venetia, you want to kick us off?
Don't mind if I do. So I would have to say that my work in climate change and the environmental community really began with my community. So that was with the Monroe Township Environmental Commission, with our green team, and then when I went to the high school, the Environmental Action Club. And we began with 2 members, and we are now at 128 active members in the course of my 4 years of the high school. And the work that we have done includes cross-collaborative learning, which is truly exemplifying what these standards are here for. And we have seen that making connections with students, no matter what career they're pursuing, is truly the key to engaging as many students as possible. One of our examples of that is the annual Eco Night that the club holds, which is our flagship event. And just recently, we wrapped up our 2nd year. And Eco Night entails essentially an environmental science fair or a sustainable innovation fair. And that's open to students in grades 4 through 12. So we truly are trying to involve as many students as possible. And we have seen some amazing exhibits come out of it. So one of the examples that I'll throw out is the Marvel Cinematic Universe environmental impacts. So some of our students, current seniors, now graduated seniors, went through all of the Marvel films and found environmental connections in each of them and demonstrated how those ideas could then be applied to real world scenarios. And that is just one of the examples of so many exhibits that truly exemplify how climate change education can be spread across any industry, any topic.
Fantastic. Thank you so much. Miriam?
Okay. For me, not every action you take to prevent climate change has to be this huge grand gesture. In Jersey City, we hold an annual park cleanup, which I always make sure to participate in. I also make sure to use my energy extremely efficiently to prevent pollution. I am sure to turn off the lights when I'm not using it. I'm sure to unplug devices when I'm done with them. I have even replaced my light bulbs with energy efficient light bulbs this year. Next, I always make sure to keep my commutes green by taking public transportation or carpooling almost everywhere I go. Although these things may seem extremely cliche, It is doing these cliche things on a day-to-day basis that will truly leave a positive impact on our environment. Further, I think it's extremely important that we as a community focus on doing these really tangible things. As for your second question, the best thing that schools could have done is that they started teaching about climate change and its effects. These lessons have sparked conversations and allowed me to find common ground with those who do not completely agree with me. These lessons opened up people's minds to new things that they did not know or did not accept previously. They have certainly opened my mind in numerous ways. Ultimately, I think what New Jersey and the governor have captured beautifully through the incorporation of climate change education is that overcoming this polarization is the key to moving forward on climate solutions.
Well said. I think that's the answer on a lot of things. So thank you. Okay, Ishan, you're up.
Yeah, thank you. And for me, I think I got introduced to the topic of climate change and its effects when I was in the 5th grade. So Greta Thunberg, the young climate activist, had called out everyone worldwide for the global climate action strike. And at our own Milburn Township, the community got together and the students did a peaceful demonstration. And several students, including me, spoke about climate change. And I think this is where I got introduced to the Eco Ambassadors program from Columbia University's Earth Institute. And my goal became to understand these problems more closely and engage my community about the local environmental issues that we're facing. And the Eco Ambassadors program really helps with this because it brings the children together, automatically also bringing the adults too, so that together everyone can work on an issue while sharing their individual unique ideas. And I've also done my own research on microplastics in New Jersey tap water. So, and to my surprise, all 13 samples from 13 different counties tested did have microplastics. So this really highlighted how big of a problem this is. And I hope to continue this project when labs are open again, because it got cut off because of COVID last March. And this year I did research on fluoride contamination in water, and I eventually came up with a natural and economical solution to remove fluoride in groundwater, since fluoride contamination is a very big problem in many underdeveloped countries. And along with these two research projects, I have also made my own podcast, which is called The Green Link, where I talk about, I talk to different environmental activists from across the world who are actively influencing the community to bring different perspectives on the environmental issues and trying to solve this one common problem, which also has a bunch of different aspects. So I feel after doing all these projects and creating this podcast, I learned so much. And in the process, I can see like so many creative solutions for many of the environmental problems that we're facing. So I hope other kids and other students can also try experimenting and exploring. And for your in regards to school, my school just ended today, as you mentioned. So in the 7th grade, I really think that since 7th grade is the earth science curriculum, I think that the earth science curriculum involves pro-climate change topics. So for example, a few weeks ago, as a team project, we found a solution to remove plastics from the ocean. And I think this project really revealed that plastic pollution is such a big problem to a lot of students in my class, which was amazing. So they got exposed for it, some of them for the first time. And there were so many creative ideas and solutions to this project. So overall, I think we're heading in the right direction, and the school is starting to engage students in these environmental topics. So I hope that the curriculum includes the environment as a mandatory subject in all the future years as well.
Great answers. Listen, our educators make such lasting impression on our lives. I can't thank you enough for that. Our second question is closely related and is for Maya, Sinai, and Alavani. With these new climate change standards, how would you like climate change education to develop in your schools? Maya, you want to start?
Yeah, sure. So I was thinking we can maybe make a club at my school, or make it like a universal club at every single school. That sole focus is combating climate change by our everyday actions and making change in our local communities. So I'm thinking that I could publicize events that are happening in New Jersey that will combat climate change and raise awareness. We can work with local nonprofits and charities along with the governor and other statewide organizations to share information and events that people all across the state can take part in. It can organize events or raise awareness about the issue through beach sweeps, rallies, putting signs up around the state talking about the issue, or having information sessions. And I think we can maybe install like different things into the schools, such as like more environmentally friendly things like hand dryers instead of single-use paper towels, or changing utensils from plastic to more biodegradable options. And you can also possibly integrate this more into our classes. Like my school, Mass, does a very good job at this. They integrate it into our senior projects and into our yearly science classes, such as chemistry and bio.
Great. Sinai?
I would say that first, I would specifically like for there to be more environmental STEM classes in schools, because I think generally when people hear the word environmental, they think that you're just learning how to put a seed in dirt and then grow a plant, but it's a lot more to it. My STEM class at Winslow Township Middle School has taught me about the United Nations 17 Sustainable Development Goals to be achieved by 2030, as well as the importance of soil, and that all ties into climate change. And people don't take into account that over the years, our soil has become so bad and that plants can't take in carbon dioxide, causing that to leak into our atmosphere and cause global warming, which is one example of climate change. Also, schools should start gardens and greenhouses. It has been proven that outdoor learning allows adolescents to acquire knowledge of issues in the environment and in their community, like climate change. And comprehension of environmental and climatic issues like climate change, global warming, rising sea levels, deforestation, desertification, just to name a few, will prepare and ensure prosperity for the next generation of young leaders that may be where we are, where many of us are right now on this panel, and they can then be the next future leaders who get to talk about these topics. And that's why climate change education is so vital.
Great. Okay, Alavani?
Can you please repeat the question?
Yeah, it's basically just with the new climate change standards that are coming into play, how would you like climate change to be integrated within your school?
I would like climate change to be integrated in my school by letting children have hands-on education, like creating renewable creating by allowing children to create new things with plastics and bottles that are used. And also the schools can start buying stuff that were recreated, like recycled papers, instead of buying papers that were created in factories.
All great answers. All of these are really important insights, and I think students like you have really pushed this conversation forward, and your input on the development of this particular curriculum is incredibly helpful. Our next question is for Venetia, Miriam, and Ishan. Governor Murphy has outlined a goal for our state to achieve 100% clean energy by the year 2050. What makes you most excited for New Jersey's future? Venetia?
Well, I will say we have seen over the last few years, especially with the pandemic, that a good energy infrastructure is essential to our way of life, especially as we see more frequent storms in New Jersey. And across the country, we're seeing so many natural disasters affect people's lives negatively and creating widespread outages and healthcare issues as well. And so specifically, I would like to see more community solar projects. I know sitting on the Environmental Commission of my township, we have seen a lot more proposals for community solar farms, which I find are a great way to use possibly unusable land or previously thought of unusable land, as well as more private homeowners installing solar grids. I know there's been an uptick in my own neighborhood, and so that's really a great thing to see. I will say also electric cars. As more companies are getting into the electric car game, that is something that's going to become more affordable for more people, which will make it a better option for more people, especially now that we're seeing in the pandemic, not many people have gone out and they're seeing what are other ways we can get around as opposed to using, single family cars. We have public transportation. So I will say those are the two main points that I would love to see more of. In terms of just overall energy goals, being able to reduce our energy usage in general. I know that we all love to keep our electronics plugged in and day out. So maybe being able to just set aside a few hours when we're not constantly plugging things in, because if we just exemplify all of those hours that our devices are plugged in, it's a lot. And that not only affects our fossil fuel usage, but also our carbon emissions. And so both of those things are greatly contributing to climate change. So being able to reduce those would go a long ways.
Perfect answer. Thank you. Miriam?
I have to agree with Venetia. However, the thing that makes me most excited for New Jersey's future is achieving this goal of 100% clean energy. I think that we have already taken a step into the future with such a comprehensive and aggressive solution to climate change. So I'm really excited to see New Jersey become the first state to successfully reduce demands for fossil fuels and carbon emissions and improve air quality, the quality of life, and the overall health of New Jersey residents. I'm really excited to see our state make history. And I'm also excited to see our state take on such aggressive actions that will drive innovation and investment in our own communities, protect these really vulnerable ecosystems that we have in New Jersey, and most importantly, create this clean energy that we all ultimately want. Ultimately, though, I'm most excited to see New Jersey to continue to excel, make progress, and to set the standards that the rest of the country should meet in terms of reversing these effects of climate change.
Amen to all that you said. All right, Ishan, you're up.
Yeah, 50% clean energy by 2030 and 100% by 2050. That's a pretty aggressive goal. And as Governor Murphy said, it'll be hard for future generations to create their Jersey Shore memories if their Jersey Shore becomes only a memory. And I cannot agree with more on this, especially New Jersey being my hometown, and I love the beaches in New Jersey. And these aggressive goals really alert people. So we do need to have more aggressive goals like this because it is already late. So I'm really excited to see my future in the right hands. And I'm excited to see New Jersey as a leader and leading the nation and all the states to see less use of fossil fuel, less greenhouse gas emissions, and yes, more electric cars on the road.
Thank you. That is inspiring to hear, needless to say. Up until now, there's been a lot of focus on what we may lose when we transition to clean energy. And I think it is so important to recognize that there is just so much to gain. Okay, Maya Sinai Alavani, what are your future plans when you eventually graduate from high school? And how do you see yourself continuing your climate change work post-graduation? Maya?
So after I graduate from high school, I'm thinking about either creating or joining a nonprofit that is run locally to help bring more attention and awareness to climate change. There are many locally nearby me, actually, such as Clean Ocean Action and even the Environmental Committee in my town's government. And I also thought I could continue to plant trees in my town and create environmental change locally. I was part of a SEAL program that is run by Clean Ocean Action that allowed me to create a project that would benefit the environment. My project was to plant trees in order to combat stormwater pollution, which contaminates the ocean and throws the chemistry of the water off balance, which eventually does lead to the emission of greenhouse gases. So I'll continue to do that. And then possibly after I do graduate high school and then go into college, I think I'll either join or possibly create a club at college that is sole purpose is to combat climate change. Possibly that could possibly make changes around the campus, such as making more environmentally friendly options. And yeah.
Fantastic. All right, Sinai?
After I graduate high school, I definitely plan to go to college and get my bachelor's and master's in architecture. I will then find a job as an architect and hopefully go back to school to get a degree in business and own my own company. And then in the midst of all that, I see myself promoting green building, meaning as an architect, I would advocate for making our buildings more energy efficient and climate friendly. Building buildings that are built to use less energy will save lots of tons of carbon dioxide from making its way to our atmosphere. And then additionally, I plan to speak up, like what Ishan was saying before, where he has his podcast. I think that's really great that he has that at such a young age. It was really interesting to hear that he had that, because that was something I wanted to have at my school, but sadly I graduated last week, so I'll be going to the high school now. But I definitely want to have a blog or a podcast or my own little organization that educates the community to fight against climate change. And we would teach people to be energy efficient, find alternatives for the everyday tasks like driving a car, keeping things plugged in for a long time, heating, ventilation, and air conditioning use. And then, like the 17th Sustainable Development Goal says, we will need partnership for this goal. So that's what I hope to do in the future.
Great. All right, Olivani?
I see myself volunteering for rehabilitation centers that surround around biodiversity loss, because that is one of the effects of climate change. I will also see myself spreading the word about climate change and answering the common questions about it, such as what it is, how it affects us, and affordable ways to actually fix the problem and pitch in.
Fantastic. Listen, I would love to have any of Miriam, Venetia, or Ishan weigh in here. I also just want to take 1 second. Well, we'll do that first, but then Ishan, I'm going to ask you last, and I wonder when we come to you if you might also add on, because I was intrigued by the podcast as well. Can you just tell us, how did you think of the idea of having a podcast, and what steps did you go through? Maybe there's a couple, maybe you can think through like 3 things you might recommend to the rest on this call and those who might be listening, because I think that's interesting for everybody. So Miriam, do you want to add anything here?
Yeah. My plans after graduating high school, I do want to become a type of environmental engineer to really get that hands-on work to prevent climate change. I want to work with others. I want to conduct research and hopefully meet a lot of others, like people on this call, who could collaborate with me and come up with really concrete solutions for climate change using the sciences and getting that out to politics so we can, reverse the effects of climate change really soon.
Well done. All right. Venetia?
So in a few short months, I'll be headed off to the College of New Jersey. I'll be earning my Bachelor's of Science degree in biology. I hope to focus on developmental and embryonic biology. And I'll also be pursuing a minor in public policy analysis and management, with hopefully a focus in either healthcare policy or environmental law policy. And I'll also be serving the community as a TCNJ Bonner Community Scholar, and I hope that my focus areas will be environmentalism as well as education. So that's how I plan on spending my next 4 years. But I will just hop on the podcast train really quick, because just this year, as part of our club repertoire, we started the Every Action Counts podcast, which is available on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and wherever you listen to podcasts. And I believe, Sanaya, you mentioned you just graduated, so you can't do a podcast for the middle school. Well, you're heading off to high school, and it is definitely possible to start a podcast in high school. We are proof of that, so don't give up on that. So in terms of our podcast, it focuses on small, tangible actions. So I think that's something that a lot of young adults can aspire to achieve, because we always feel like we are too insignificant to make massive change. And that's grossly untrue. So our podcast goes a long ways in demonstrating that we are able to make change at the local and county levels.
All right, Ishan, we're in your hands. Let us know.
So I think I created my podcast. I created my podcast in the beginning of this year during Christmas break. So I think I got the idea from other people creating podcasts during quarantine. And I think I really got my inspiration from one of my younger cousins who actually created his podcast. And he's younger than me. So that was really inspiring to see. So I got my inspiration from there. But since I'm doing all of these projects, I wanted to create me a podcast about spreading the word about the environment and climate change. So I got a few contacts from, I got a few contacts, and those contacts were about people who work in the environment. And I think what was really surprising was to see all these different people are part of the environment, but there's so many different aspects about it. There's so many occupations that have to do with the environment. So I think that's really cool to see in my podcast. I forgot how many I've done so far. I think I do like 2 every month, something like that. But yeah, so I think that was the inspiration of my podcast and how I kept it going.
What's the name of your podcast? If someone should.
Oh yeah, it's called. You can also find it on most podcast directories, and on Apple Podcasts. It's called The Green Link, and I think I got that name from different occupations kind of linking together. So, yeah.
Excellent. Okay, and anybody else involved in the podcast before we go off of this topic? Okay. So Venetia, what's your podcast do? Just out of curiosity, because I now think I have a sense of what Ishan's doing. What's yours?
So our podcast is actually created by our podcast working group as part of the Environmental Action Club. And so we take requests for topics from our membership, from our student body. So truly we're creating a podcast that our students want to listen to and are interested in. Most recently, I believe last week, we interviewed Dr. Alexis Mraz from the College of New Jersey. She's an assistant professor there, on environmental health and how public health relates to environmental health and the health of our communities. She also works with the UN Sustainable Development Goals, so that was really interesting for us. In the past, we've also interviewed students. So we interviewed Chris Gliwa from Princeton University, who is pursuing environmental engineering. So we truly try to be as diverse as the environmental community is. And we try to do a deep dive on certain topics that we feel that we are educated enough on. But for topics that are a little out of our niche, we invite guests onto.
Great. Excellent. Thank you. So climate change certainly is going to affect our lives in ways we can't even imagine. So even if our students don't pursue careers directly involved in the climate crisis, everyone is going to need to be prepared and informed for the ways our lives will change moving forward. Okay, this question is kind of related and it's for everyone. Tackling climate change requires an interdisciplinary approach, which is why we made sure to educate our future leaders about climate change across all subjects. Dream big. If you could design any job in the world to tackle climate change, what would it be and what would you do? Who wants to start? Maya, should I have to throw this one out to you?
Okay, so I took a more business approach to this one. So I said it could basically be like a liaison for climate change in business. So they would work with energy companies and big businesses. Oh my goodness, big businesses. Sorry about that. And instilling environmentally friendly practices that are supported by governmental practices. For example, they'd find financially and socially beneficial practices for all like different brands such as Macy's and like big energy companies such as IBM and stuff like that. They would have power over all the businesses areas such as packaging, manufacturing practices, and where their products are created or sourced. So it's all environmentally friendly. And this is kind of similar to the EPA, which is the Environmental Protection Association, but would be the job position between the association and to the organizations and businesses that they regulate.
Great. Sinai?
I would say that the job that I came up with was more general where everyone can do it, and it's focused on healthy living. So people in the community or around the world work together and clean up waste or trash and mow people's lawns, go to door to door educating people on sustainability and sustainable practices, have monthly bike ventures as an alternative to driving cars and all that gas getting in the air. And people would all have their own gardens. And then after a long time, I hope that this club will create like a community garden for everyone to see that has flowers and vegetables and the public may have them. And eventually we would get volunteers from the community to help us tend to the garden and provide fresh crops for everyone. Because I think the main misconception about this is that you have to be a certain age, where we're obviously proving that you don't, because we're all fairly different ages. And I feel like everyone around the world, no matter your race, ethnicity, age, whatever it is, I feel like if you have a voice and you have something to say and you know what you're doing and you want to take action, then you shouldn't be scared to do that, because I think we're all future leaders and we can all make a change no matter what size or ethnicity or whatever we are.
Well said. Okay, Alvani?
I would start popularizing jobs that aren't as common as they should be. these jobs are making and selling items that are handmade from renewable sources, such as creating paints with flowers instead of other materials, and creating blank paper out of newspaper and then selling them. I'd also like to see schools buying these items and using them, and also us, because it would be beneficial instead of buying them from factories that use fossil fuels.
Perfect. Great. Thank you. Miriam, Venetia, Ishan, anybody want to add anything in here?
I would love to. Although this Although the sky really is the limit with this question, I would want to remain within the realm of reason. So if I could create any job to tackle climate change, it would be a mixture of an environmental engineering job and a conservation or renewable energy scientist. This is because environmental engineering is the branch that focuses on protecting the environment by reducing waste and pollution in a really hands-on way, which is also dedicated to improving environmental conditions through remediation. While conservation and renewable energy scientists, they conduct research to protect the Earth's natural resources. So that I really felt that the combination between these two jobs, although it may really be grueling to study, it would create the perfect job to combat climate change because it would perfectly combine aspects of research and hands-on application to aggressively attempt to reverse the effects of climate change. However, I also thought that inventing a time machine and creating jobs for mad scientists to completely reverse the effects of climate change would also be pretty cool.
That sounds pretty cool. All right, Venetia?
So I would say mine is more of a mix of Maya and Sanaya's ideas, where we'd want to stay local because mostly local change I find is most effective in long-term change. So perhaps something as a community agent or a county agent, depending on how different states are set up, where their sole responsibility would be to outreach and link up with the community, right? So we have different nonprofits in the community, different environmental, governmental groups, and truly seeing how can they work together to educate those that maybe don't believe in climate change or don't understand its effects as well as starting projects young. So we see that young education and or just early childhood education is truly the best stepping stone to a lifetime opportunity or lifetime love of learning about the climate and doing something about it. So truly engaging with the community would be it's their main role. And especially when we look at communities that are not as well connected. So we're thinking maybe urban areas, rural areas, maybe not the suburbs per se, because suburbs I find they're already in neighborhoods for the most part. But for rural America and for urban cities, linking up communities that might be too far apart, maybe across mountain ranges, maybe across farmlands, and bringing them together to have community events and truly make this a community-wide effort.
Great. Ishan?
Yeah, so I think I'll take a different approach on this. Personally, I don't think that climate change fits into one job category because it's a little too broad. But I would say that it's a job that everyone should keep in their day-to-day life. So like, for example, a parent has this job to remind their children to turn off the tap or switch off the lights or not to waste food. And a teacher can teach these things so that it's not just, it's kind of reinforced in the classroom. And at the state level or the national level, politically, it's the policymakers who understand this problem and hopefully make decisions in the right direction. So it doesn't really have to fit into one job category, but I think everyone takes the responsibility and it's a job that we all should do. But I really like all of the jobs that everyone else thought of.
Listen, I would just say to each of you, and particularly glomming onto what Ishan just said, one of the reasons why we want to make sure we are teaching climate change education across all standards of the curriculum is that we really think that it's going to take everyone from public policy experts on the one hand to people who are in advertising and public relations and the artists to communicate the challenges and the solutions. And so I love all of your answers. There's no wrong answer here. You're all leaning in perfectly, and I cannot thank you enough. So the next question is also open to everyone. And I'm just wondering, what makes you personally passionate about tackling climate change? And do you have any role models? So should we start with Maya? You started last time. You want to start again this time since you've spoken longest ago?
Oh, yeah, I can. So what makes me really passionate is because I grew up around the shore and saw firsthand the effects of what climate change has done to like the beaches and stuff. So as you know, Mass is on Sandy Hook, and there's a ton of stuff that's been going on there due to climate change, such as ocean acidification, and like animals are being threatened, their habitats are being destroyed every year, such as the osprey. They're now an endangered species, such as the sandpiper as well. So because of that, I've been looking around to find some role models, and Tessa Khan is a big one for me. She took a law perspective, and she looked at a case in the Netherlands which talked about greenhouse gas emissions, and she realized how the courts could play such a powerful role in combating climate change. And she now provides assistance around the world to everyone who has any issues regarding inadequate climate policies. So she helps combat climate change through the governments, which I thought was a very interesting approach, because like if you just like pick up a water bottle, it's not as much as going to like the Supreme Court or something and getting a huge law passed that can affect everyone and like the whole entire country. So I thought that was a really interesting approach by her.
Well said. Okay. Sinai?
So this may sound cliche, but I think the thing that makes me most passionate about tackling climate change is knowing that I can change the lives of so many people, because I've traveled places where I've seen people who live harder lives than others, and it's honestly really sad, even though you're not in their position, but you can just feel how they're struggling, and people who are in poverty, it's extremely sad to see any kind of homeless person on the street, anything like that, and then how it's affecting the earth and the animals, and animals who intake this water that has all these pollutants in it, or the gas that they breathe. It's all extremely sad. And I think that a major role model for me was my STEM teacher, Mr. Cruz, because he's continued to show me small ways and big ways that I can make a difference. And he's always believed in me and never told me that, oh, I can't do this because I'm a female, or I can't do this because of my race or ethnicity. He's always let me broaden my horizons and told me that I can do something, and that I should never try to belittle my intelligence or feel like I can't, or I have to be enclosed in a box, like I can't do anything else like everyone else.
Great. Alavani?
I'm very passionate about this because I've been around to see many mountain views, many beaches, and also I've been around to many places where I can see polluted mountains and polluted beaches. And instead of just letting all of that happen and letting the world crumble beneath our feet, I believe that we should all just pitch in to ensure that we can keep the beauty of this world.
God bless you. Totally agree with that. Okay, Miriam?
I agree with everyone who just spoke. In its simplicity, I'm passionate about tackling climate change because it's the single thing that dictates all of our futures. This is our planet. If we don't take care of it, our home, who will? One of my biggest role models in regards to the climate crisis is Greta Thunberg, which I know Ishan mentioned. First, she's a teenager like most of us, so she showed me that you do not have to be in a position of power to speak out about the effects of climate change. Further, she has Asperger's syndrome, so everything that she has been able to accomplish in spite of this is truly so inspiring. Despite everything, she has never given up, and she always advocates against the effects of climate change. I one day hope to be as strong as an advocate as she is, and has accomplished as much for our environment as she has.
I have no doubt you will. Okay, Venetia, you're up.
I'm actually going to flip the question and start with my role model just because of how closely they're related to why I'm so passionate. So I would have to start with my father, who is the person that introduced me to the wonder and beauty of the natural world since I could hold a garden shovel. Without him, I would not have planted my first flowers or attended my first township green fair, which I believe is the true impetus for why I'm so involved in my environmental community, which has led to so many other things. Beyond him, I would have to give a shout out to our Environmental Action Club advisors, Dr. Pangos and Mr. Peria, because they allowed us the freedom to explore all of these different project ideas and really gave us the opportunities to see what worked best, see what we wanted to do and really pursue our passion projects, which I think not enough people are allowed to do. So I think that was something that really inspired me. And I would say my main reason for being so passionate is how we can affect the generations after us, the people around us. And it doesn't have to be affecting all of the billions of people around the world, but even just in our hometown or in our state, being able to see how we're improving the world around us. And I can say just in my community, being able to have different resources like a community garden, a butterfly garden, rain barrels, solar panels, and that provides so much for the community. And it really is a joy to see. And you don't get any monetary reward or any special award for it, but being able to see the joy on people's faces, although that sounds a bit cheesy, is truly wonderful.
All right. Okay, Ishan.
Yeah, I definitely agree with Miriam and Venetia. I think what makes me really passionate about tackling climate change is that I know it'll affect future generations positively, and also me and my family when we're older, because things are only getting worse as time goes on unless we change. I think someone really involved with climate change is Elon Musk. Great person to look up to because he introduced electric cars and changed the mindset of people and made it a reality when it was pretty much unthinkable. So I think setting really high goals, again, which others may think is unachievable, but then obviously you have to work towards them, meeting them, is a really good strategy to get things going.
So thank you so much. These are some great responses and role models. Elon Musk, I'll have to keep our eyes on them. Okay, so our next question is also open to everyone. What do you say to skeptics who say that climate change is too complicated for kindergartners or first graders to learn? And how about those who believe that climate change just isn't real? Mix it up here. All right, Miriam, you're up.
Okay. So I would tell them that everyone learns about climate change eventually, even children, whether they overhear it from different conversations, pick it up from social media, or they learn about it in schools, they still learn about climate change. Although I acknowledge the validity in their argument that climate change is an extremely complicated topic to learn, is there really such a thing as too young? We are not suggesting that we teach kids only about the difficulties that climate change can cause. We are suggesting that we present them with a problem, climate change, and offer solutions that even first graders and kindergartners can engage in. As for those who believe that climate change isn't real, I know that no amount of statistics or scientific research can change their mind. At its heart, climate change denial is a conflict between facts and values. People deny the climate crisis because to them, it just feels wrong. It could be that the idea of climate change is a threat to our worldview, or it could be that we fear society's response to climate change. Either way, climate change has become such an inconvenient truth to some people that they suppress it wholeheartedly. The solution to this is stop presenting climate change as a problem, but rather as a challenge that needs a solution. Do not address these people by attacking them. Rather, be open-minded to what they have to say. Show them that climate change is not a helpless problem. Show them that there are solutions to climate change. And show them that you are so undoubtedly right that they have no choice to believe that climate change is real and that they must take action.
Okay, I'm glad to hear you quoting Al Gore there with an inconvenient truth. So well done. Okay, Maya, you're up.
Okay, so I do think it's very much possible that we can educate our younger youth about climate change rather than later on. So you can start off with easier subjects such as planting and how like the ocean works, stuff like that, rather than ocean acidification and greenhouse gases, because that was not easy for me to learn when I first heard about it. And I completely agree with Miriam's approach towards how to help those who don't believe in climate change get more used to this subject. Presenting it as a problem that needs a solution is a great way to combat that ideology.
All right, Sinai?
I agree with all the topics that Miriam brought up because I feel like you can start small because climate change is such a broad and really evasive topic for young minds to understand. But I also think it's important to be realistic with younger children and not just tell them, oh, like whatever you see on the news, don't worry about it, you're too young. I think it's very important to instill that kind of critical details to them at a young age because they're the next future leaders, and they're going to continue and continue and continue with the next generations that come and go. So I think that knowing that they can do something about it and starting small with, you could just tell them to turn off a light, and then as they get older, expand the curriculum, tell them what they can do, or influence them to make their own projects to help climate change. And then I would say for any people who don't believe climate change is real, I would just tell them to step outside or just check the news and see what climate change is actually doing to people, because I think everyone doesn't really acknowledge things unless they happen directly towards them, even though climate change is all around us. So they need to check the news and see what's going on in the world around them.
Hey, Sinai, to that point, I think a lot of people think of climate change as being a polar bear jumping from one iceberg to the next, and they don't understand it's the algal blooms, it's the torrential rainpours, it's the crazy storms that we're seeing, and the dramatic weather changes. So I would love actually to have each of you give me your best example of what climate change is in your own backyard, but we'll come to that in the next question. Alvani, what do you think about the skeptics?
I agree with what everybody has said before me. Every child has the ability to understand what climate change is, whether it be explained in a lower level for them or a higher level. They all have the decisions to tell their parents that they would rather walk to school instead of drive the bus or a car. They also have the decision to reuse papers instead of throwing them away once they've written one sentence on them. And as for the skeptics who don't believe climate change is real, I would just tell them to look at the news and look at how the climate is hotter than it was before, and look at the unrealistic weathers that are now being presented to us because of what we have done.
Thank you. All right, Ishan?
So I would say that the people who think that it's too complicated for kindergartners or first graders to learn, I would say that they're wrong. And I believe that it's even better to actually expose these topics to younger people rather than when they're a little older, because then they start understanding it, and when they become older, they'll most likely not question it. So because they'll have that ingrained kind of in themselves, and it'll most probably they'll show their habits with others, because it's harder to, again, change the mindset of, for example, like a teenager. Like, it's hard to change a teenager's mindset rather than a child. So it's not really a hard topic to understand, and I really wasn't surprised when I saw the amazing, unique solutions that elementary kids, some of them being kindergartners and first graders, came up with in a contest organized in our town. So for adults that don't believe in climate change, I don't see why you wouldn't, because the evidence is all around us. More intense and frequent storms, droughts, heat waves, rising sea levels, melting glaciers, warming oceans, and overall just really unpredictable weather. So the only thing I would say to those people is, don't you see it? And I really like the concept of not seeing climate change as a problem, but as a challenge, and to find a solution for it.
Great. All right, Venetia, you're up.
I would start with saying to the skeptics, preschoolers are able to learn about the climate, and kindergartners and first graders and everyone is able to learn, because we have to start young, and we just have to format the information in a way that is digestible. And I'll use our own example here in Monroe Township. The Environmental Action Club worked with the Falcon's Nest Preschool to teach them about the importance of trees and carbon dioxide and all of those items by reading the Lorax and having a story time, right? And then they went off and they did a recycled craft with recycled newspapers, learning that you have these materials, let's reuse them. We then had a donation from the Shade Tree Commission give each preschooler a little seedling that they got to take home and plant and take care of. And that really ingrained the idea that they have ownership of their actions and that their actions have tangible impacts. And so just by doing that for the last 2 to 3 years, we've seen then preschoolers, now first and second graders, come back and say, hey, I remember these ideas. I am now implementing these ideas. So to all of the skeptics, I say, not true. In terms of those that don't believe in climate change, I will say, first and foremost, we must depoliticize the term climate change. And I think before it became a political agenda item, there was much more public buy-in because we weren't divided. And so we think Conservation Corps, we see Silent Spring by Rachel Carson, all of those ideas in previous decades had much more public support because it wasn't a political idea. And it shouldn't be, because it's not, which party will have the better earth? No, we're all here together. We all share the same home. We're all going to either perish together or survive together. So we must all we are all stakeholders in this idea and in this problem. And earlier this year, I read about government officials in areas that don't believe in climate change frame their environmental actions in the concept of, this is best for our economy. This is best for our children. And as a parent yourself, you probably understand that parents want to do what's best for their children. So by framing it as, here's some water plants and this will clear the water out, which will bring you better water for your children, that is much more effective than saying climate change needs us to have this. And so by depoliticizing and by reframing our words and our actions, we can go a long way to convincing those non-believers.
Incredibly well said. It's funny when I talk all the time about how to, when people say you can't teach a kindergartner about climate change. Well, I'm thinking to myself, we are not going to teach a kindergartner how to read Chaucer or Hemingway or how to do advanced trigonometry. You've got to build on all of these things over time and give everybody the vocabulary and the toolkit that is needed in order to be at a point where we're going to be able to really move mountains here, which we're going to end up having to do. I'm really proud because I know that New Jersey is going to be at the forefront of this, because we are the ones who are starting out here and giving all of you and those who come after you the toolkit. So we are running out of time, but I wanted to quickly just ask 30 seconds if anybody wants to add anything they didn't get to say or something's triggered. So I'm going to hit each of you. If you want to say something, great. And if not, we'll just move straight on. Okay. So Miriam, anything you want to add?
I will just add real quick. You had asked about climate change in our own backyards. And in Jersey City, just recently in early June, we had a really cold December day where I wore my sweatshirt to bed. And then the very next day I woke up and everyone outside was wearing shorts. So if this doesn't prove that climate change is real, I don't really know what will. And I hope that everyone here continues their efforts to prevent and reverse the effects of climate change.
Thank you. All right, Maya?
I don't have much to add. Everyone else said everything beautifully.
Perfect. How about Sinai?
I don't have anything to add as well. I think everything was well said, and I really like the panel that we have today. Everyone had really great points.
Alavani?
Just like with the question of climate change in my backyard, I would like to say that my street is becoming grayer and grayer with the days. The green grasses that were on the pavement are now being removed and replaced with cement. And the trees that were in other people's backyards are not being chopped off for no apparent reason.
All right, Venetia?
So I will add to the climate change in our backyard. I remember Hurricane Sandy, which was back when I was in elementary school, and my town lost power for about 2 weeks. So we were out of school for 2 weeks, and Monroe has a lot of trees, so that was probably most of the reason why all the power lines were down. But that just reminds me that that was nearly a decade ago. It is only going to get worse from here. And if the power is out for 2 weeks, what does that mean for people? What does that mean for people who rely on the electricity for their medical equipment or their daily lives? And so if that was not enough proof back then, what else is now? But I will also add that this panel is really lovely and I'm inspired by all of you. This is actually the first time that I have been the oldest person on the panel, which is really funny to me. And I'm really honored that there are so many of you that are out there and taking up the good fight. So thank you for doing that.
Okay, Ishan.
Again, the backyard question. So it didn't really happen in my backyard, but it snowed for the first time in Texas this last winter. So I think that was really mind-blowing thing that happened this year. So that really shows how climate change is affecting us.
Great. Okay. Last thing from each of you. Just buzz around. How old are you? When I call out your name, please just tell us how old each of you are, okay? Maya?
15.
15. Sinai?
14.
All right. Alavani?
13.
Ishan?
12.
Venetia?
18.
All right. Wow. The oldest one, right? No one's asking me, thank God. Okay. Miriam?
16.
Okay. Okay. Listen, wow. I mean, we've really covered a lot in a very short amount of time. And I want to thank all of these incredible panelists for taking the time to be here, for their passion, dedication, and optimism. As we work to prepare our educators for the implementation of our climate change education standards beginning September of 22, it is so heartening to know that we have students eagerly awaiting those lessons. I think I speak for everyone watching when I say how proud we all are of this generation of students. You are passionately involved in shaping the future of our state, of our nation, and really the world. You're personally committed to doing all you can to fight the climate crisis, and we are committed to doing all we can to make sure you are prepared as leaders and as informed citizens. This past year alone, you have shown incredible resilience and focus. So I wish you all wonderful and well-deserved summer vacation. To everyone at home watching, please share this video with your social networks and spread the word on New Jersey's climate change education standards. We are so proud to be the first in the nation to achieve this, but we truly cannot wait to see who joins us next. Thanks again, everyone. Love my great panelists, and have a great summer.